Great. Good morning. Good morning, everyone, on this snowy day. It's Thursday, March 2nd, and we're starting our day with a member of our committee, Representative Leonore Dodge, who's a member of the Social Equity Caucus. And as members know, that a lot of this, as we've heard through previous testimony this session, but also like over the last few years, the body has done a lot of work to address social equity issues in our work. So this is a great opportunity to have a little bit more focus on it, especially as we're coming into the home stretch before crossover. So you're in our committee, so I don't get to say welcome, but great to have you here talking with us, yeah. Representative Dodge.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to share this this tool. It's kind of a set of questions that are just to prompt us to think about equity issues. And it was developed by the Social Equity Caucus, which is a little special because it's, it started out with very few legislators because there were very few legislators, who identified as BIPOC or who, wanted to develop a social equity caucus. And then so it has always involved community members from the start. And so this tool likewise also was developed by community members alongside legislators, including community members who then just became legislators, this biennium. So it's a pretty, deep probing question. And we wanted to have the committees just in general have an introduction to it and not have it just be something that, was a process. We actually want to have people keep it alive and look at it. And then we are tracking, its use, whether it was helpful, whether the discussion led to further discussions, and to give feedback on its its appropriateness. This is great timing, like you said, because we're a committee that deals with like a big bill, and so you'll see that it. We called it an equity lens tool, and sure. Why don't I give you those, and I'll take one, and I'll give one this way.
Do you want me?
Sure. I did make enough for everybody. Oh, okay. Too. I just figured you guys would want to get your hands on it first. So they use kind of the metaphor of the lens a lot, but I thought that for the Transportation Committee, I thought about is it more like a stethoscope? You're trying to find like the heart of the matter, and if you listen in the wrong spot, you won't really hear it. But I really thought, hey, good morning. It seemed like for us,
Right, to come in like chairs, like a dump truck.
No, it's fine. So we're talking about the equity lens, and I decided that for our committee, we should call it the equity snooper.
I love it.
Because it's a specialized tool to help gather data. It finds hidden cracks and rust issues before they get really bad, and it helps us determine appropriate fixes. And so why talk about this in Vermont, right? Like what, well, it's because in part we have this image of what Vermont is, right? When we think about a typical Vermonter, it might be somebody who's been here for generations and generations, who's rooted in the land. And, when in reality, when we scratch the surface of that, like most people got here 100 years ago, if at most, generally, unless you're native Abenaki. And even then, there's a lot of mixing, and there's a lot, we've had waves, just like the governor talked about in his inauguration speech. I love that because I go to that all the time when I talk to people who are like, oh, these newcomers. I'm like, we're all, if you just scratch a little bit, you're going to find French Canadian roots, Irish roots, Polish roots, Italian roots. Look at the churches in our communities, in our towns. Look at the granite monuments. None of this would have happened. None of our state would have happened. Eastern European Jews, Middle Eastern Arabs, then Bosnians and the Sudanese. Like just in my 25 odd years of being in Vermont, I've seen wave upon wave of immigrant communities that come, and and obviously I'm Mexican, so I really focus on those strong roots and that element in our economy, in our culture, in our society. We think of Vermont as very rural, but the reality also we should keep in mind is that the urban centers, quote unquote urban centers, right, are the ones that are growing. And so our demographics will change, our geography will change as rural populations age and get smaller. We think of our state as having kind of a smaller economy, maybe a more simple economy, but when you think about like School for International Training or Dealer.com or world-class recording studios or Beta, industries, we are pretty tech savvy. And we think about Vermont as being generally pretty progressive, but, we also see like racial slurs in schools. We see Confederate flags flying, and we see, tensions in our social in our justice system. So we also think that, Vermont is the second whitest state in the nation, but from the 2010 to 2020 census, the Black population rose by 44%, and the Latino population grew by 68.4%. So that's the third largest increase in the nation. So we are the state with the third biggest Latino growth in the nation. It doesn't take that many people to make a big difference to our proportions, right? And why use the word equity as opposed to equality, right? We always used to talk about equality. The equality discussions often ended up making our differences and our unique identities disappear or pretend that they didn't matter. And that, if I evenly slice up this pie and I give everybody a piece, that should make everyone happy. But what if I don't like pie? What if I want flan, or I want rice pudding, or I want, steak? And equity, on the other hand, recognizes that individuals have unique goals and unique identities, and they face challenges. We all face challenges based on many factors. And the goal with equity work is to really listen to people who are on the margins for whatever reason and remove the barriers that they face, right? So it's not an issue of thinking that a person is incapable. It's that we recognize that there are structures in place that might prevent somebody from actually achieving the goal that they want, that is their goal, not just, imposed on somebody. So again, to bring it to transportation lingo, it's about stop, look, listen, and it's about encouraging traffic flow. Okay, so that's the equity goal, as opposed to the equality goal, which is just like everybody gets, there's only this much, and everybody gets a piece that's the same piece, regardless of what your needs are.
Are there roundabouts?
What's that?
Are there roundabouts?
There could be roundabouts. I think that roundabouts are exactly the kind of thing.
Traffic flow.
Traffic flow, it does. It helps traffic flow, but I think complete streets applies as well. So you all have in front of you this tool, as we call it. I'm calling it the snooper because we're in transportation.
Okay.
Not a lens, but a snooper. And so we'll just sort of go through it together. The Vermont legislature, the Social Equity Caucus developed this and said, this is the challenge. How do legislators determine and then address systemic equity problems? So those are like the barriers that I was mentioning, right? We recognize like race is a social construct, right? That manifested through caste systems, arbitrary hierarchy of power, but yet it's so challenging, right? So like the equality thing that said the race doesn't exist, like it was trying to say it shouldn't exist. But the fact is that we do get categorized and our life gets, we do have barriers placed in front of us just simply because of where we were born, what we looked like when we were born, what our parents, religion practice, et cetera, et cetera. And so, it's asking us to question how do we undo it? And then our role as legislators, how do we value our collective humanity? And without perpetuating those barriers, without just reinforcing and just adding more and more concrete, right? Number one, probing equity questions, the overarching goal, how does the proposed, so these are sort of, as you can probably gather, questions to ask as we are drafting bills or considering bills before us. And so, it's not about like community building, or it's not, how do I deal with my family, or, or a conflict that has come up. It's really geared toward our work, toward legislative work. So number one, the overarching goal. How does the proposed legislation distribute wealth and resources to increase social well-being for the racial or ethnic groups most adversely impacted? And so it starts with race and ethnicity, because that currently in our country is still the biggest marker. It's still the most determining. It's still the biggest barrier for, that all things being equal, you can be poor or have a disability or be LGBTQ or, a whole lot of things. But if you are also Black or brown and those things, you are much worse off in terms of educational chances, in terms of wealth, in terms of life, expectancy, health markers, housing, a whole lot of that, and transportation. And then number two, which individuals benefit from the proposed bill? And then here it goes, right, it broadens the snooper to look for data along issues of, yes, BIPOC populations, but also LGBTQ plus, disability, migrant communities. If they don't benefit from this proposed bill, how might they? Number three, why is the legislative committee seeking to address this issue? And then under that, is the purpose of the legislation to uplift the communities that are most adversely impacted? And then what evidence has informed this bill, right? So we've got the overarching goal. Who is going to benefit? If not, how can they? Why? Why are we looking at this issue and maybe not another issue? Number four, engagement. And this one I really love, because it's really about bringing the voice of regular Vermonters into the legislative process. And so how is the committee being informed by the people most impacted by the outcomes of the proposed bill? What resources are needed to engage the voices and experiences of BIPOC, LGBTQ plus, disability, and migrant communities in the formulation of the bill? How will these communities be engaged in the evaluation of its success? So beyond just our build, are we building into our legislation a plan to follow up and see whether this actually helped people or harmed people? And does the language or terminology of the bill reflect the self-identity of any of the groups mentioned? And are there terms that might be considered hurtful or damaging? Are we based in today's reality of how people identify and what social identity terms we're groups are currently using? And I don't have to remind people, it's like, think of, what my grandparents' terms might mean to some people today, that things that might have been, and this happens also cross-culturally, like my family in Mexico will use terms that are not okay with a lot of people that, Latinos in the US would not be okay with, for instance. So the best way to figure out those terms is to speak to people. It's just respectful. Timeline. How quickly will the communities most affected by racial and social inequities begin to benefit from the proposed bill? So is this going to be an immediate fix, or is this a long-term fix? Or are we focusing on both the immediate needs and the long-term benefits? And then number 6, repairing harm. And this is, I guess, really going to the heart of the removing barriers, that we have built, that people really do live under. How does the bill address recovery and repair of broken relationships by dismantling systemic structures that cause harm? So that's about, I think, in the process of the engagement and even asking the questions and having the open discussions in committee, that begins to build that trust, right? Like I'm being named, I'm being even like considered in the legislative process, helps to build the broken relationships. And then how will the bill provide for more equitable and just systems for all Vermonters? Could the bill have disparate negative impacts on underrepresented groups? If yes, how can disparate impact be mitigated? There's some typos in this, but I hope we can all agree that typos are just, a human to technology intimate relationship that we'll never be able to get rid of. So, I love how sometimes we have gone through those conversations in our committee about, this might help, this might impact this problem, right, of the being poor, and so you're paying, you lose your license more likely because you're poor. And so we try to help people that have economic challenges, right, to remove the barrier to be able to work by letting you keep your license and letting you keep driving. And then, our esteemed colleague here, Representative Walker, was like, yeah, what about the funds then for victims of crime, or the victims impacted by the accidents, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that those are exactly the kind of conversations. So Representative Walker is a natural at this, and we should have asked him to present the social equity lens, the social equity snooper. And then could the bill have disparate negative impacts on marginalized or underrepresented groups, kind of the same issue? And then if yes, how can those be mitigated? I think that was pretty much the heart of it. And so, I just want to do a brief introduction. A lot of committees have used the tools, like Chair Coffey had recommended maybe putting it up. That's what a lot of chairs have done in their committees. And I've talked on and on and on. In our social equity caucus, we introduced these at the beginning of the session and actually brought up a bill of just a short 2-page bill, and we looked at the bill in little mini groups and considered, is this a good bill? Is this a bad bill? And it was a bill to protect people from who it guaranteed that if you stop somebody who is about to engage in a criminal act, that you would have some protection. And so, we looked at that and we considered, is the wording really is there an equity lens that shows that in fact this might result in a lot of people who might get hurt just because of how they look, how they dress, how they sound, because it gave a lot of protection to somebody who might just act out of fear. And so historically, right, we think about what has happened in our, what patterns we've seen in the past, and so it was, it was a bill to make it off the wall, I believe. So I think that
this is great. I mean, this is great. This is great because I want to. Are you open to having some discussion and questions? We have a little bit of time for that.
Yeah, if we have time, I'm happy to do it. I tried to zoom through it, but it is a big issue, obviously, and it's not the last time that.
So just, thank you for bringing this to our committee. And also the committees are having in the House are having an opportunity to hear about this. And for members who've been here for a long time, we have a government accountability committee. We've used results-based, RBA, yeah, results-based accountability. And this is like another, this is another lens to bring to our work. So I just wanted to get, before we dive into looking at our next draft, are there people want to have questions, comments, a conversation about this?
I have a question for you.
Go, please.
So, a couple of years ago, in the transportation bill, there was some language that was put in the transportation bill about equity. And when we had the conversation, we ended up putting in equity because we thought that socioeconomic Vermonters and geographically isolated Vermonters were also disadvantaged. Has your caucus ever talked about that? I mean, and it didn't center around LGBTQ or BIPOC, but the language was broad enough so that we brought all Vermonters into the conversation down our way, down my way, down Representative Boyd's way. Certainly, we don't have large BIPOC communities, but we do have a large disadvantaged community. Southwestern Vermont is the new Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. So have you ever talked about that? And I don't want to disparage Northeast Kingdom, but it's become, we have a lot of economically disadvantaged folks down that way. So have you ever talked about that in the Social Equity Caucus?
Yes, so like I said, there's the Rural Caucus, and there's the Rainbow Caucus, and there's, the older, Vermonters Caucus, there's a
Younger.
There's a younger.
Is there a list somewhere?
I know, I don't think we do have a centralized.
Now, there's more caucuses
So-
than committees.
I think that's a great question, because I think it gets to the heart of, I'm not sure whether you were here when I was saying that, the Social Equity Caucus believes that if you don't start at least the discussion with issues around race, because that is the marker that you could be poor, you could be socioeconomically, at this level of income in your household, or you could have a disability, or you could have a less than a college graduation or high school graduation level. But if you are also Black or brown, your chances in life are already below even at that stage.
We could have an offline conversation about what I have the language that
Yeah.
we use in that bill in my file, and in fact, I have the whole bill in my file because Chair and I had a discussion about that early on. So I'll provide you with that language, so maybe you folks could talk about it in the conference.
Oh, I'd love, and we can talk about it. This is the point, is that we now have the tool.
It did.
make it through. Okay, that'd be good to see. I mean, and Leonore too, I know that while it's in the executive branch too, I mean, we could, Susanna Davis, who's the director of racial equity, is also kind of using a similar, a different because of a different process.
Yes.
But just using that lens through the administration's work and how, proposals within the administration come forward. So I think it could, to dovetail with this, it could be interesting for the committee to hear how the Agency of Transportation is doing that. So
Right. They have a tool called the Policy Impact Assessment, and it is a really in-depth survey of did you look at this? What did you come up with? Did you look at this? What did you come up with? And supposedly every agency, needs to kind of submit this with their
proposals. So it could be something interesting to have. And certainly, when this is great. We could put it, I think it might be helpful to have it up on the board over there. Yeah, Representative Lally?
Yeah, I just wanted to, thank you, Leonore. I just wanted to make a comment. I personally think that the more we can coordinate the goals for transportation with land use in the built environment, the more we can create that sort of bigger pie that gives everybody a larger slice, as we figure out what the pie is and what the slices are.
and help people
on that part. But I think the idea of creating more than we have now, it's not a zero-sum game.
Right. And the one thing that I think we didn't get to, which I think makes a really big difference, is that, kind of like schools now have discovered that if you have a universal, what do they call it? UDL, universal design approach, which is, you might need a visual explanation for your concept instead of just an oral one, because you have a student who really doesn't learn orally very well and needs a visual, that in fact, probably half your class will benefit, if not most of your class will also benefit from that visual explanation. And so a lot of these things, when we talk about will this help rural communities, yes, if we do this properly, it should help everybody, right? And so when we remove barriers for the people who have the most barriers in front of them, we are removing barriers for everybody. And so it's it isn't a zero-sum game, like you said, Representative Lally. It is about, and I love that about the equity vision. It's taking into account that we are all complicated, complex identities, people with some, hidden identities, some obvious identities, and so it is about removing barriers for all of us. Yeah.
Representative.
I'm just thinking about, some of our programs and policies, and one of the things I'm thinking of is the electric vehicle incentives, And we have tried to make them sensitive to different incomes, but we also have the Mileage Smart program, which takes care of people, at a certain lower income. And the whole thing about helping people buy newer cars is that create eventually used cars that people can pass on. So you might look at, well, maybe this is benefiting a certain income, but it's also creating a market that will benefit. So I think that sometimes.
That's number 5, timeline.
Okay.
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so I'm just trying to look at some of our policies using this lens
Absolutely.
and sort of see, are we doing this or not? What are we doing? What could we do better?
Right. So that's the question. Will it help marginalized groups now or later?
Mhm.
What, and what should we be focusing on? And, how do we make sure we're doing both of those things?
And
Yeah.
Representative Berg, your kind of example is interesting, kind of grounding it in this committee's work, and then thinking about translation or just certain things that you can translate. We got to hear at DMV about how they're really attentive to this with language. So a lot of this does, and it very much relates to the work of this committee. And so when people come in, giving testimony, these can be some of the questions that you might want to consider, and certainly in the legislation that we draft. We're going to have to pivot soon, so.
I'll just make one more comment.
Oh, sure, of course, yeah.
Adds on to that. That Mileage Smart has provided 478 cars to people who have been funded. I don't know if that's just this past fiscal year or maybe even.
Thank you.
Effectively.
It could be useful to get some of that data broken down to more granular, making sure materials are going out translated.
That's great. Our super needs data.
So this is great. Thank you. Other, yes.
Our town's doing a big thing about making sure we're looking at the lens as we look at policies we have and all that. And at Green Mountain Transit, we're doing the same thing. So this is not new, but it's the first time I've heard a really good description of equity versus equality. So I appreciate that. I think I'll take that away with me. Yeah.
Not everyone wants pie. Great.
Great, well, thank you. This is a nice way to start our day. All right, so thank you again. So we're going to move into looking at the next draft that we have. And Anthea is back with us. So why don't you come on up?
Chris is on his way up. He was just in the Cedar Creek room waiting for you to wrap up.
And you have a big stack of.
I do have a big stack of paper.
Yeah.
Fresh from the copy room. So while I'm getting my Zoom screen ready.
Yeah. Can we help with?
No.
Good.
So going to my right, or do you want me to hand them to someone or
Thank you.
pass?
I can help pass it.
Okay, there you go. So that is the current draft you're going to be working off of. It's draft 3.1. The other document is going to be a side-by-side just for the sections that were pulled from H101. And that is showing the differences between H101 and what the agency is now proposing as those replacement sections. In terms of the highlighting in this document, for the most part, the highlighting will be a difference from draft 2.2. But when we get to those sections where they are the ones that were pulled from H101, the highlighting will indicate a difference from H101. So I'll make sure that everyone is on the same page when we get there.
So there's a lot of Molly, I'm having a hard time hearing, so, yeah. We just have blowers and pencil sharpeners going on, so if we can just, and I want to get us to give our full attention to Anthea, because there's a lot of paper coming out, and that this is the process that we're in, so.
Chris, you want one?
So Anthea, just to,
So, we're just, Jeannie, I need the Zoom link. You sent me a calendar invite without a Zoom link.
while you're doing that, I'm just gonna say, so this is representing the work we've been starting to weave things together and the edits that we have worked on. Just want to make sure that it's posted so Scott can see it. It is posted.
And I will put it up on the screen once I can get into your Zoom room.
Looks like a room.
Jeannie is calling me. You hear me? Thank you, Jeannie.
Okay. Version.
Okay, so I will take my lead from the committee in terms of where you would like to start. If you want to start at the beginning and just work your way forward, or start with the newer stuff. I know that you're going to be waiting for some additional information from the agency.
So just to be sure I'm clear, our last walkthrough, we took a couple things a little bit out of order because we wanted to have, we spent 2 hours on like the EV, essentially for short, I'm calling it the EV section. So did we get through all of that?
You got through all of that. You didn't really make a lot of decisions there. So I can tell you in terms of the differences that you will see from draft 2.2 to 3.1 here is there's going to be language about the ceiling for the flexibility on the base MSRP shifting, where, it was at the discretion of the agency. I now have a but not to exceed, and then there's a blank for you to fill in. And also for purposes of the 20 miles per charge for the PHEV, I put in the EPA reference, which tracks what's in Mileage Smart.
Okay.
I also, and this wasn't something you talked about, but it was something that Chris and I talked about offline, in terms of the carry forward language that was in your T-bill last year, because it said that it was for the programs that were in session law. And now you're going to be codifying it, just going back and saying session law or the iteration codified in 19 VSA chapter 29. So those are the only changes that were made to the EV sections.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, so I think for the committee, I'll just share what I do. I keep copies of what we worked on in my marked up copies, and I'm looking to compare. And Anthea's done like also a side by side that she'll walk us through.
Yeah, and that's just for the
H101.
climate H101 piece.
So this is when we have a lot of papers on our desk, and you'll hear. So just want to ground everybody in what we're doing, because this is the part. So great. So I think it makes sense for us to start at the top of the bill, and let's go through it. And so what the committee is going to see, this is the agency's proposed language, and we went through that and made some changes, and those will be reflected in here. The committee also decided about some parts of sections of H101 that could come in here, and we had discussions with Michelle Boomhauer on some things that needed to be tweaked or changed or that the agency could live with, we think. So that's reflected in this draft. So I'll stop there. I just want to, that's where we are.
That's a great introduction. I forgot to introduce myself. For the record, Anthea Dexter Cooper from the Office of Legislative Counsel. So one thing I will point out when you're looking at this draft is you'll see that the disclaimer is off the top saying it's the agency's proposal, since now the committee has really started working on it. Just to be clear, especially for new members, you can keep making changes. Just because that disclaimer is gone, it doesn't mean that you are now stopped from making changes. This is your bill. The agency does sort of the first pass of it, and the General Assembly will continue doing its work. And while I work very, very closely with the agency and, their proposed language for H101, for example, I don't work for the agency, I work for you. So if you are seeing this language and you're like, this isn't really what I want, and you want me to do a different iteration of it, contact me and we can work on something there. And then it's to all of you to figure out if it actually gets incorporated. But I want to make clear that, especially for the new members, the disclaimer is off, but it doesn't mean you can't keep making changes. And just because I have for the most part, been working with the agency on language doesn't mean that I can't work with all of you on language. Okay, for your subjects, I've just added in or changed slightly some of the subjects there. I'll continue to do that until the bill is finalized, but just highlighting the fact that now the carbon reduction program, the Protect Formula program, and Complete Streets are addressed in this version of the T-bill. There are no changes to section 101. This is that very important section that adopts the T-bill, adopts the transportation program, except as amended. I don't think this is a section you can necessarily close out until you're done with your white book process, but it's there. There haven't been any changes. It still has in subsection C, that one technical correction.
And can I just say to the committee that we will come back, when we do our work on the white book, we will come back to this section.
Okay, section 2, I am on page 4 now, and you'll see that I put in green, per response to HAC, section 2 was not recommended for funding. So these are your connectivity grants, the $3 million. In the response to House appropriations, you said that you sort of liked the idea, supported it, but not really at this time, address in the future. I didn't want to take this language out until you had a chance to tell me to take it out. But I think even if you don't take it out, if you would need to modify it, because this is adding something to the white book that you're not necessarily going to be funding, and you want the white book to be funded. So I'll pause there.
We should take it out. That's what we decided yesterday.
So if we don't fund the program, but we agree with the program, it's kind of is there a place to put the language in the bill that's not in the white book?
Well, the bill and the white book sort of become the same thing.
Right, okay.
You certainly need to get rid of the fact that you're authorizing them to spend $3 million in one-time general fund monies. And then I think the question is, why are you adding the project now if you're not funding it? And maybe it's a thing that you just save the language for. And if come Budget Adjustment Act time, there's going to be money for it, then you have the Budget Adjustment Act amend the T-bill, this T-bill,
So
to add this back.
I guess my question would be this, Anthea, they are currently spending money on this program.
I don't think they're spending money on this program. I think they're spending money on other bike pedestrian grants that are otherwise reflected in different places in the white book.
Well, because I wonder the Sanders are earmarked, is earmarked for the LVRT.
Yeah, and I think that's you should hear from the agency on this, but what I took from the testimony that I have heard, and I certainly haven't heard all of it, is that the portions of that money that's been made available is already programmed other places in the white book.
Oh.
I don't know if Chris or Costa, who I believe is on.
Yeah, Chris from Joint Fiscal, I'd certainly defer to Costa, but my understanding is that the earmark money is reflected in the white book. This is similar concept, but this is separate and distinct. This is dealing with general fund money. So this is a similar purpose, if you will, but this is not they're not directly linked. This is sort of on top of what is already being made available.
Program.
You see my confusion?
I do.
Or is it?
So let's ask Costa, is Costa's with us and his camera came on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Costa Pappas with the Agency of Transportation. That is correct. The funding that's been allocated, the 900,000 or so, it is reflected in the book. Now, there is a difference between the earmark and the governor's recommended. And this program using general funds is specifically for connectivity. The earmark is broader, encompasses a broader range of activities.
Costa, I think one of the things that could be helpful is when Senator Sanders made that earmark, who was the recipient of that earmark? Was it the Agency of Transportation, or was it the 18 different communities that are on the trail, or another entity?
It was the Agency of Transportation. So statutorily at the federal level, earmarks are assigned to a state Department of Transportation. They don't go directly to other entities, even though they're the intended recipient. So all the earmarks have to be funneled through the Agency of Transportation.
And so does it show up in our white book?
It does. The projects do.
Okay. So did you get, there are a couple of questions before you, Representative McCoy. So can I think I need to take them in order. Yeah. Are you satisfied? Okay. So Representative Lally, and then Representative Campbell, and then Representative McCoy.
So I'm just confused. I want to make sure that we are not doing this. We are not precluding. I want to make sure that we are authorizing the connectivity grants to happen in the future. I want to make sure we're creating a placeholder for this, and then we're not jeopardizing the loss of this money. And maybe I'm not understanding something.
Well,
We've talked about this BAA, but is there any concern about if this language were removed from the bill, that might?
Well, you're not, if you remove this language from the bill, you're not authorizing them to do the connectivity grants, but you can in the future when you provide money for the grants.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at. So here's my position is I would, if we're not going to fund it, I would prefer that we still authorize it so that it can happen.
We'd have to have a dispense, I mean.
Which I understand is a separate thing, but I'm just.
You don't want the authorizations and the things that you're telling them to do to exceed the amount of money that you're giving them to do it. So my question for you would then be, why can't you wait to add the authorization language until you give them the money for the grant program?
Okay, I guess maybe I'm a little confused because it seems like we have other things authorized in the bill that we choose to not fund, or maybe I'm misunderstanding that. Maybe that's a difference between session law and codified laws.
So
correct?
You can have a program that exists,
Okay.
but that's a little bit different than putting it in the white book, which is the
Okay.
plan for the next.
And that's what this is for. That's what we're doing
So
here.
this language is specifically
Rookie
saying,
questions.
No, it's okay.
they're good questions, especially since it's new. This is saying we're adding a project to the white book by saying project addition. We're adding it to the white book and we're authorizing you to spend $3 million. You're then, unless House Appropriations doesn't go with your recommendation and they choose to put the $3 million towards it, you're then in a position where you've authorized them to do something, you've added a project to the white book, knowing that you're not then giving them the money to do it. If at some point in the future you do give them the money to do it, I think that would be the appropriate time to then tell them the parameters of the grant program. You might be in a position where when you talk about this at Budget Adjustment Act time or a year from now when you're working on your next T-bill, and you don't think that this is the right iteration of a connectivity grant program, you would have to change what you would put in law for no reason other than to say, we like the idea.
Okay.
And can you speak to we cannot, within session law, about how we can bind a future legislature?
Yeah, so you can't bind a future legislature in terms of saying this money can only be used for this purpose and you can't notwithstand it. So I'm going to use the carry forward example, when you're saying all this money is for the vehicle incentive programs, and you're saying it's going to carry forward and be used for that purpose, this next current General Assembly could say, we've changed our minds and we actually don't want to put all this money towards vehicle incentive programs. When you're dealing with the white book, because so much of it is project driven, you kind of have to be willing to follow through on the full amount for the project, because otherwise you're going to have a bunch of half-built bridges and stuff, which is why you can't really take the money back, even though you can't tell the future General Assembly that they can't take the money back.
Thank you. I get the logic now. Thank you.
Okay.
So I think Representative Campbell had a question or a comment.
Yes, thank you. I didn't realize that we had voted to take the entire $3 million. I thought we had left some of it in there. $2 million.
You were not in committee yesterday when we were doing our memo to the House Appropriations
That was the
Committee.
final 2 minutes. Okay, yeah, I had to leave it, but I did.
Well, we spent a long time on it yesterday, actually, so I think it's,
Well,
I'm sorry that you were.
So my question is, was there conversation also about, I don't know, maybe I missed this too. Was there a conversation also about leaving some money in there in order to leave this language, this program language in the bill? That could be an adjustment.
Scott, I'm sorry, we spent a lot of time yesterday on this, and I'm kind of not willing to kind of we made decisions yesterday about it. So we did talk a lot about this.
Thank you.
Representative McCoy.
So I guess I'm confused because did I hear, Costa, did you say something about 900,000 earmarked? I thought it was 2 million.
That's out of the 2 million.
Oh, I thought it was $2 million from Senator Sanders.
It is $2 million, Representative. A little over 900,000 has been allocated so far.
Okay. So the other will be carried forward for next year? Or?
Well, so some of the awards to communities were for scoping studies, and the anticipation is once they're through with the scoping studies that they're going to be ready for.
Not the connectivity grant.
Okay, so they will be coming back to ask for it in this next fiscal year, FY24. The other 0.1 million. Okay, so the $900,000. This is in the white book. Where might I find it in the white book?
Like that.
Bike paths.
Yeah, we actually, Joel, remember when Joel was in here, we talked about this, yeah.
Okay.
And then
So I was a bit confused on the 2 million and only 900,000.
And we also had a presentation on the rail trails, where she gave a presentation.
I was here for those two, but I was a bit confused when he said 900,000 because I thought it was 2 million.
Sure.
And that was sort of part of the discussion, like in budget adjustment, we could take that 1.1 and plug it in there for the construction.
Right.
So it's sort of like really not, we'll have momentum going.
Okay, so I'm good.
1 million.
I'm good with it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify,
Just all clarification. Thank you.
so, what, Representative Shaw?
I think some of the confusion is because the presentation that we received from the rail trail folks.
Yeah.
Talking about the money in the program alludes to the fact that they have $2 million
Yes.
in grant money.
Right.
And then it also alluded to the fact that they're asking for another $3 million more. And it doesesn't say for starting a new program, it just so.
Yeah, I was here for that one.
Yeah,
I was.
Presentation that
Okay.
we gave us.
Okay, good, thank you.
Want to maybe Costa could pass that along to
Bike ped people.
Jackie Lucino, have her
yes.
fix that, the last slide, or the next to the last slide they gave us, Costa, because it's very, very confusing. It was confusing to me.
We had discussion in committee about it, but it would be good to clarify that.
That's one last question.
Sure.
The agency can use this to continue their connectivity things, right? On the LVRT, this 1.1 million, if it's in that's at the discretion, right?
So, I think, so right now, there's 900, the testimony that we received is that the AOT received $2 million from Senator Sanders' office in an earmark. We are seeing 900,000 of that programmed in this year's white book. The way, I'm not an expert on federal funding, but the money doesn't all come in one chunk. It's like, it comes in different chunks, and often you have to expend the funds and you get reimbursed, and they're all different programs. So I think when you ask about the 1.1, I think that's in AOT's world, right? So for them to put in, I think the question before us is whether we need this language on a program that we decided not to fund, right? Is that so?
Yeah. We would need the short answer. That 1.1, we would need to authorize that budget adjustment once we see the scoping studies, if they're ready. But they don't have the authority to expend that yet.
Perfect, that's what I was looking for, thank you.
Short
That's a
answer.
that's a good clarifying explanation. Representative Pouch.
Thank you. So then doesn't this language explain, you know, the program and where it's going, or?
A program that we're not funding? No, I mean, there's no program. This language would authorize a program that we're not funding. There's still, the testimony that we got, they're still doing the scoping work. They don't need this grant program to do that. That's happening within the bike ped program.
Yeah.
That's the testimony that we received both from Joel Perigo and from Jackie Casino, right?
Yeah, no, correct.
So,
So to be clear, we're just deleting section 2.
that's what I think we should. I think we should, because we made this
Cross it out.
decision already.
Move on. Yes, okay.
Would they, I mean, just a technical question, the 3 million, we wouldn't need to adjust our numbers, right? Because it's not our money, so we wouldn't need to adjust the line item for bike and ped.
That is such a good segue. Because if you're gonna cross this out, I was gonna say, if you go to your very, very, very last tab, I think it's the very last tab in the white book where it's got the one time for the 6.5 million, I think you'll just replace this with a section 2 that says delete that 3 million, which you probably were gonna need to do anyway once you found out what House Appropriations was gonna do with the 3 million general. So I'm gonna strike this out and I'm gonna add a substitute section that says, get rid of that 3 million.
That's the grants.
As a section 2.
Yeah, I guess I'll do it there.
Okay.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I could just clarify, what Anthea said is exactly right, but just so the committee is aware, that will not change the bike ped number in the white book, because that's reflected in the one-time tab. So that federal earmark we've been talking about is already baked in here in the bike ped tab. You can see it on page 25 of that tab. So whatever decision you all make about that 3 million has nothing to do with that $2 million or the $2 million earmark.
Great.
Get through that.
Yes, we did one section that we already decided yesterday. So, yeah. So here we go.
Okay, I will put the share screen back up. So section 3, this is gonna be the top of page 5. This is the $3.5 million in your capital fund operating monies for the St. Albans District Maintenance Facility. I don't know if there's been a conversation with your colleagues in House Corrections and Institutions on this, or?
Representative Shaw sat in on that, and also I think I sent Michelle Boomhauer, there were some questions that came up, and I just want to let the committee, I sent you an email this morning, forwarding language from about with questions. So Representative Shaw, though, do you want to kind of recap? It's from me. I sent it to the committee.
Okay, I got it, 6:30 this morning.
Yeah.
Okay. I
Yeah.
was on the road, so.
Yes, you were probably driving. And there are a couple of different things in this, but there's one about the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail, the St. Albans and aviation position. So, because those were some of the questions, right?
So I was down in institutions when they were talking about this. Committee had a lot of questions for them, and currently where the money coming from, and how much money do they really need, and what's the cost of the project, and all the other variables that would affect the capital bill. And we found that in our testimony, we found that the funding, they've canceled the Lunenburg Garage project. They've got carry forward from maintenance. They've got carry forward from transportation buildings. And that gets them to needing 3.5 million more to complete the project. And they've already purchased the property at $499,000, and I don't want to bore you today with why it's $499. Representative Cochran was going to do some work on that. I stopped in, have you heard back from the chair of institutions yet?
No, I don't think they've made a decision.
And I stopped back in yesterday, and they hadn't made a decision at noontime. A lot of things happen in the afternoon. So probably the best thing to do would be leave that section in until we hear from them.
And if that's being funded through the capital budget, does this language need to follow that, I mean, I know this is a tab in our white book. I think it's tab 27.
It's a tab. I think for purposes of, and I would defer to Chris, for purposes of keeping like the transportation world in one place, I think it's helpful. But I don't know if it would be earth-shatteringly problematic if it was not in here. What you would potentially be doing, like this is a nice reminder placeholder for like, do you need to change that 3.5 million in your white book in that last tab, much like you just did with the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail piece. So I think it probably is, you still have a couple weeks before you're going to be done to just leave this here for now.
For discussion for another day, the $3.5 million is actually not coming from the capital bill allowable spending this year. It's actually supposed to come from a cash fund.
Yeah.
It was set up 2 years ago or 1 year ago. So that's
last year.
That's the kind of the angst that institutions is having. Do we open that up yet or not? And among other things.
So we'll keep it for now. Sounds like we need to, right? Until a decision's made.
But regardless, it's never been T money. It's capital money.
Right, it's not coming out, yeah. It's
A portion of it is capital. Yeah, outside of the other things that Representative Chelsea,
Right.
with the Lunenburg and.
Right.
Yeah.
So I just want to say that my understanding is that typically the agency would have come to this committee asking for approval for that. And there's a threshold of a dollar figure. And I've heard this spoken about, but I'm not sure if we've spoken about it in this committee, that threshold is, $500,000. Is that my understanding?
It's 500,000, they have to get our approval if it's not a project in the white book. So if it's in the white book, they have discretion of, how they spend the money. But if it's not in the white book, sort of like a new project, yes, if it's over 500,000. Commission. What was the price on this?
$499.
$499, that's interesting.
But anyway.
And is that figure consistent across, there are other areas where we do that, or is that special to the transportation world?
500,000 is in Title 19.
Okay.
I don't know if that applies to other aspects of.
Because BGS often, is the buildings and general services, the purchasing buildings and that's where a lot of the capital budget money goes. And
I think they're at 200,000.
I think it's at 200. That might be something interesting to find out about for the committee, just as a.
It's at 28.
Okay. All right, without belaboring that anymore. So we need to, I think I would like to know what that is. All right, so I think we can move on to the next section.
Okay, section 4, these are your one project cancellation in subsection A, and then subsection B, which is sort of a swap, but it's a cancellation and an addition, and that's in Sheldon. My notes indicate that the committee was good with B and C, but you were circling back with A, the Bennington bypass cancellation.
I think we need to have a little bit of committee discussion here.
I made my appeal, I don't want to rehash it, but, I just make a motion to remove section A. Get wound up again,
we don't want to.
I made my plea.
Yeah.
I'll
My
second
reason,
that.
What
did you ask?
Section what?
just remove the elimination of the Bennington bypass zone. So remove section A of section 4.
I just have a question on that. Has it been canceled? I mean, was there a letter that canceled it?
It can't be canceled without the General Assembly doing it. It's not a municipal project the way that you can get sort of like the notice from the municipality under 19 BSA section 10G subsection H. They need approval from the General Assembly to cancel the project.
But I would say, yes, that's part of my heartburn. Technically, no, but yes.
Okay, but I mean, it doesn't hurt to keep it in, right?
What's that? I mean, to take it out.
No, I mean-
Just on principle. I want this removed. essentially.
Correct. You want to keep it in.
I want this language out. If I keep it in, they're canceling it.
Okay,
Want it
that's what I mean.
Yes.
My brain is thinking.
So Representative Walker,
Opposite, removing it is not.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Representative Walker, you had
I
your.
did have a question. Was the testimony that they needed the cancellation to start another project that are we already spending money on?
No, it was, in my mind, it was hypothetical that the town was willing to take that on to do a trail there. But there's no language anywhere.
There is not another project started or.
No, that was like, that was a possibility if we would move forward on this.
And you're good with that?
As of today,
Okay.
yes, right now. This has to go through a whole process.
Okay.
It's gotta go over the Senate, and I'm sure I know what the Senate's gonna do, but,
Thank you for the clarity.
Yeah, so Representative Trott. Oh, you have a question? We don't need to, we can take a formal vote for sure, but we can also, it seems like I'm seeing heads nodding around the table that, that people don't have a problem with taking this out of the bill. We've had some discussion on it. Okay, let's,
Crossing it out.
Okay, so I will be making it project cancellation, project addition, subsection A will be struck, and then B will become A, and C will become B. And circling back, I can tell you that the citation that Chris referenced in Title 19, it is $500,000. I'm gonna, the next time you're having a committee discussion, text my colleague who does BGS stuff to see if she can give me the site for what the BGS threshold is.
thank you.
Sorry, where's the 500?
We're gonna find it. No, it was the question about what the threshold is for the requiring approval by the legislature to move forward with the project and how AOT's world compares with other BGS in particular. Yeah.
Yes.
You guys were more efficient in your discussion about it, but this is the 500,000.
Oh, here we go.
19.
I love it that you show us how we can use the legislature's, the General Assembly's website. It's always great.
Just teaching us to fit.
It is also nice to be able to use your text messaging devices to, phone a friend who knows more things outside of Title 19 than Chris and I do. Okay, section 5, I had that this was something you were circling back to. These are the transportation positions. I think you had almost closed the loop on it, but hadn't fully closed the loop on it.
Michelle had emailed me to share with the committee, and this was the one piece she thought she would get something last night. She was on that train that derailed, she's in DC, she's at a conference.
She's on the train that derailed.
Not the train that derailed, the one that hit the truck, on
Everyone's fine.
she was going down
The irony.
to DC. Yeah, so her travel time that she was gonna have to work on the train, a lovely train ride, got really upended, and she wound up arriving at 4:30 in the morning on Tuesday. So I think that's had a little bit of an impact, so I think we want to give her some space. I know it's on her radar. I emailed with her, and she's tracking this information down. So if we might want to come back to this, yeah.
I can't believe you didn't say her plans were derailed.
I know.
I was gonna write it in the pun book.
Yeah. Well, part of it is that there's another piece of news about that in Vermont that is in my district, and so I was dealing with that last night. So. But I don't want to, so I think we need to come back, we'll get the detail on what this is. So.
I have that section 6 you had closed out. This was the central garage fund that you were fine with.
We had done the work on this. The committee remembers that we did a lot of work on this, and so. Oh, this is good. We can skip to sections.
Okay. Section 7, this is going to be on page 8. When you were talking about this last time, section 7 was amending codified law to just strike out a $300,000 for the cap for a grant allocation and replace it with $600,000. The agency had said that the reason why they were recommending that was because the amount of money that the state is getting from the federal government for purposes of the Transportation Alternatives Grant Program was doubled, so they thought the grant allocation amount should also be doubled. Representative Corcoran brought up the fact that since this was linked to the IIJA, maybe it made sense to sunset it. That ends up being sort of complicated because it's not really a sunset, because sunsets are a prospective repeal. This would be a prospective, like, reversion to current law. And then there was the question about what should the effective date be, knowing that sometimes the equivalent of, like, the IIJA, the FAST Act, gets extended if they haven't figured things out on a federal level. So I worked with Chris and Michelle. We came up with what an effective date could be, and then thought about it some more and thought, well, maybe it should just be session law, notwithstanding codified law, saying that in fiscal years 2024 to 2027, grant awards shall not exceed $600,000. So what this has the effect of doing is saying that for the next 3 fiscal years, can't do math, 4 years, 24, 25, 26, 27, the grant cap is $600,000. And then without the General Assembly needing to do anything, it goes back to $300,000 on state fiscal year 2028.
So how are people feel with this?
Yeah, sounds good.
Sounds logical.
Okay. So section 7 with the new language that's good. Now we are into your EV language. So I'm going to say at the beginning with section 8, I think this is the section, even though it's in the beginning, because this is repealing all of the session law, I think you don't address section 8 until you decide what you're codifying. And if you decide not to codify it all, you decide if you want to repeal session law for a program you're not codifying and then sort of start fresh in session law so that, like, any changes you're making are all in one place. So I would say skip section 8 until you decide everything that you're codifying and then go back to section 8.
Great, that sounds great. Sorry, I was thinking. We're about to dive into section 9, and
unless you want to skip and come back.
Well, it's up to the committee. I mean, this is like a big chunk of this bill, and Anthony did a really great kind of side by side. And I also, he was just here, Patrick Murphy. I think he's coming back in, but it might be good to have him in the room with us when we do it, if people don't mind coming back. And he also sent us, he sent me an email this morning that was kind of a one-page kind of overview. And I believe Jeannie sent it to the committee. It's also on our webpage, I believe. So maybe if the committee agrees that we could just wait to have Patrick in the room with us, because we might just get some questions answered if we in real time for the whole EV section. Yeah, is everyone okay with that?
Okay, so that's going to take you to section 14A on page 26. And now we're getting into the MBUF stuff. Which, do you want Patrick here for that too?
Costa. Patrick, yeah.
Costa's still here.
Hi, Costa.
Hello.
Hi. Is it okay if we move forward with this without Patrick in the room?
Well, Madam Chair, he will be returning, and I think given some of the technicalities around this topic, it might be a good idea for him to be present.
Okay, that sounds good. Then we're just flying through this bill.
Okay, so that takes us to new stuff. Almost new stuff. Section 18, these are your repeals, and this is going to be on page 33.
Like half
Right?
an hour.
Like, ooh,
Thank you
for
giving us the patience.
Guys, apologies for people, I'm scrolling very fast. Okay, page 33, section 18 repeals. So the first one in subsection A is repealing outright the sunset, the prospective repeal of the public-private partnership pilot program. Subsection B is repealing the obsolete preempted language that the Transportation Board can deal with the connection of passenger trains. And subsection C is repealing language on municipalities setting covered bridge restrictions through a vote at a town meeting. Probably should have been repealed last year when the language was moved from Title 19 to Title 23 and is covered by language in Title 23 and language in Title 24 on municipal authority. And this has to do with posting and restricting over height, over length, and over weight vehicles through covered bridges. And you dealt with all of that last year. I think this is just a piece that should have been repealed last year and wasn't. So those are your three repeals.
Representative Shaw.
Okay, let's go back to A, repeal and repeal. So through all that language, the action resolve of 158, section 21 is still working now, still current law, still codified.
So what 2018 action resolve number 158, section 21 says, and I can pull it up if the committee wants to see it, is this section of law, this section of codified law is repealed on July 1 of 2023. So if you take out that piece of session law that says the codified law is repealed, then the codified law, which is the public-private partnership pilot program, will continue to be codified law until the General Assembly changes it in some way. So you're repealing the session law that said you were going to repeal the codified law, a long way of saying you're just keeping the codified law.
Unlike the next two.
Unlike the next two, yes.
That's what really confused people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
A repeal of a repeal versus a repeal of codified law.
And we heard I'm just trying to find my notes. Help me remember the testimony that we received on this or this.
From Michelle about the fact that they haven't actually done a P3 under this.
That's right.
Statute yet, but they spent a lot of time working on it and they might in the future.
So they haven't, okay.
Yeah, one of the things that, just doing this, you're still keeping all of the language that says this is a pilot program. The General Assembly needs to come back and look at it. You could do a more extensive cleanup to that language, but maybe that's something to decide in a couple years if, you revisit this. Another approach, and this is not what the agency is proposing, but just because the agency is not proposing it doesn't mean you can't do it, is instead of repealing the prospective repeal to continue to keep the codified law, you can just push it out down the road a couple years if you want to have this conversation again, because maybe in 3 years they still haven't done a P3 under the pilot program, and you're going to decide that you don't want this floating out there in codified law just for the possibility. So that's when you're thinking about a sunset, your options are let the sunset happen, which means the codified law goes away. Get rid of the sunset, which means the codified law stays in codified law, or extend the sunset. And thinking about decisions that this committee has made in the past, if you'll remember, it would have been when Representative Murphy was on the committee, there was the repeal of a sunset that had to do with vehicles that were being used for delivering mail with the airbag. And you decided that that was something that shouldn't be an extended sunset. You wanted it to stay in codified law. Last year, when you were dealing with the transportation network companies and the savings clause for Burlington, you decided to bump that out 3 years down the road because you wanted to revisit it again. Those are the different decisions that you've made in different circumstances with how to address a sunset.
I mean, it seems to me like having a sunset is a way to remind the General Assembly to come back in and check in on something. It's our mechanism. Given that we haven't done one of these, but that we might do in the future, I guess to me, is something like, oh, we might want to have a little check-in again.
So that would be changing subsection A to, instead of it being 2018 Acts and Resolves number 158, section 21 is repealed, it would amend it to cross out the July 1, 2023 and stick in a new year, 2025, 2026, whatever the committee decides.
It was me and you were on the same, I said the
Okay.
exact same thing
Yeah.
last year for the last topic. Yeah, she knows that,
Yeah,
yeah, no, I was gonna say the same thing. And just to refresh your memory, they thought this could be a useful tool for EV charging stations.
That's what I was
right?
thinking, yeah,
right.
that's what I was thinking. I think,
But yeah, the whole point of a sunset is to say, how's it going? We don't know that.
otherwise it can get lost, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it can just kind of get lost.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So does the committee, what does the rest of the committee think of having a way to, a mechanism for having a look at this again? Which would extend the sunset to
Pick a day.
pick a year. Next year, 2 years?
So we can ask Patrick when they think they're gonna have some possibility of EV.
I'll take this down to the agency.
Look at, we're customer already, magic, yeah, right.
Yeah, we're talking about repeals there for section 18 with the P3 program. And we want to, honestly, we want to continue it, but we don't want a permanent thing in law or statute without having some feedback. And there was discussions that you guys might look to this for EV charging stations, public-private partnerships there. When do you think that would be a possibility to have those type of agreements so we could have a check back?
Sure. So Patrick Murphy, Agency of Transportation. It's not clear yet when those projects might come up because of, I think the context in which we discussed this last was, if there isn't a private site host available that we might look to, public site, publicly owned site. But I would expect that would come up in the next couple of years. So if we're looking at sort of the agency coming back to report on whether there's been more instances and in what cases that's happened and kind of how that has worked, something like 3 years or to come back, revisit it, or kind of take this up again.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I mean, we could pencil in 3 or 4 and, if you talk to your higher ups and if that's the wrong number, we can address it then, yeah.
So you don't think it'll be happening much sooner than that with the NEVI, with the?
It could, it's just, it would be a special circumstance where, for whatever reason, private site host wasn't available to work with us. So it will take some time to get out some of the fast charging funds, both at the state and federal level. So, when we're looking at installations, probably at the earliest, late this year, possibly into next year.
Yeah, I'm fine with any number, as long as there's numbers. I mean, it could be 20 years for all I care. I mean, as long as they just check back, I don't want 20 years, but 4 or 5, it doesn't matter to me.
How about 2 years?
Whatever it is, yeah,
So that would
whatever
be-
the number is.
2025.
Yeah. Costa, sorry, I see Costa's hand up. Sorry, Costa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So remember that the original intent of this program was to align it with P3 policies and initiatives at the federal level. This predated the IIJA, and at the time, this was not, generally about EV charging infrastructure. This was about, what happens when federal grant programs include, as they've done, in some cases, private participation as a condition or as a bonus in the evaluation criteria for successfully landing federal grants. So as originally envisioned, this was, a what if scenario if a company wanted to build something and needed some transportation infrastructure, or what would happen if they wanted to participate in the development of the transportation infrastructure itself. So the long-term horizon is for this very purpose, is we don't know who's going to make a proposal to use the right-of-way that we own in transportation, or come up with a business idea that may require the P3. So just kind of a background on the original intent of the P3 program, why we developed it, and what the focus was, and maybe in the future. Thank you.
That's helpful. Representative Shaw?
Thank you. Costa, I've shaken the cobwebs out of my head a little bit, but I think I remember some conversations about P3 programs for rest area constructions. And it might have been through BGS. This is back during Governor Shumlin's term. Did these two link together at all?
A P3 could apply to a rest area. Yeah, that's an example of one. Another one is broadband. If again, we're going back 4 years here when we were envisioning this language. If a broadband provider wanted to wire using the state highway system, that would make a persuasive case for also branching out to communities and businesses. So we were thinking of how do we position ourselves for these very scenarios, a P3 for rest areas, a P3 for broadband, something that has tangible benefits beyond the immediate transportation needs. So to answer your question, Representative, yes, that was an illustrative example of something that could arise where we needed a framework to be able to evaluate and move forward with a P3.
Thank you.
So adding a sunset doesn't repeal the ability to, it's just a check-in. So people okay with 2 years?
Yeah, whatever the numbers.
Yeah, that would be.
I would just say that it would take at least a year to put a deal together, and a year before that, before anything happened, and another year before looking at it to see if it's even working or not. It's going to take a couple of years before it even happens, so maybe 3 or 4 years. But I'm totally cool with whatever you decide.
I just know that there's some things percolating about a lot of different things, and I just think maybe that's this is not a die in my sword kind of issue.
Not at all.
The other issue, I'm sure we're gonna hear about it if it happens in this committee. Like next year, all of a sudden, somebody comes back and says, oh, we have our first public-private partnership. So it's not like we're not going to hear about it.
Wouldn't we look so smart how we anticipate it?
I want to say something very, very obvious. If you extend it 2 years or 3 years, it will be the next General Assembly that's looking at it. If you extend it 4 years, it skips like a 2-year cycle. So just if that's something where you want to make sure that the next batch of people sitting in these chairs look at it, going to 4 years would skip over them. Doesn't mean they couldn't look at it, but there wouldn't be that like trigger point.
So once again, I think it's a good idea that we're looking for public-private partnerships. So why wouldn't we want to repeal the sunset and move and make it codified law without having a check back? Because as I said, I'm sure we're going to have, if we have a partnership, transportation is going to have to come in here and tell us that we have a partnership. So it's not like we don't like the idea and we're just repealing the repeal, which makes it law. So why don't we just do it now?
Because I think we don't have an example yet in front of us. So
Exactly.
that's where I'm just like, because we don't have an example in front of us, I just let's just have a check-in in 2 years. We're hearing that this is going on. We have federal money that's gonna push this. We know that this is gonna happen. So what's the harm of I think it's our oversight role.
So one thing that I'm going to add, just in case it gives people comfort, there is language in Title 19 for the public-private partnership program that talks about what happens if it's repealed and there are pending public-private partnerships. They don't just go away. So I will pull that up. Hold on. Here we go. So the two things that I will add here are under the public-private partnership pilot program law, which is in 19 VSA chapter 26, subchapter 2, it says, if the agency's authority under this subchapter terminates, the General Assembly intends that the agency not have authority to pursue any proposal that has not resulted in a P3 agreement prior to the termination of the agency's authority, and any P3 agreement lawfully entered into prior to the termination of the agency's authority shall continue in effect after termination of the authority. So if that gives people comfort as to the fact that this might go away and stop a public-private partnership that's been entered into, that is addressed. It was the intent. The other thing I'll add here is due to just some issues with the reports database and the agency not being aware of the fact that they were supposed to be providing a report on this. I think it would have been a very boring report for the last few years because there weren't any public-private partnerships. There is a reporting requirement. So annually on or before January 15th, the agency needs to report on these public-private partnerships. So you are requiring them under the law that if you repeal the sunset or extend the sunset, that you are telling them you need to give us information about these P3 projects. So not only are they likely to tell you about it, they have to tell you about it.
So where does that leave us?
I mean, I'm good with repealing the repeal, but if people think we need to, I mean, they're gonna have to check back anyway. So if that's what we're asking for is a check back, it's in law that they have to check back. So I don't know.
Like you said, I'm not dying on my sword. I mean, it's just impressive with any new program. The way I look at it is, you know, if you don't have an example, give us one. Was it running smooth? Is it running bad? Do we need to tweak it? I mean, that was the whole point of the thought process when we put that in originally, and they haven't had anything. I know the original intent that Costas talked about, but those haven't come to fruition yet. Now, the next phase is maybe the EV charging might bear some fruit on this program. So, but in 5 years, I mean, I don't know, whatever the number is, just put it back in.
3 years,
But,
you know.
I don't know.
I just think.
But like I said, I you know, whatever.
What? We need to move on.
Yeah.
Can we just agree that, like, that we'll put, the committee's okay? We can do it 3 years, 3 years, let's do 3 years, okay? Yeah.
So,
Like, because there's, that's little a, and every B and C.
okay.
Representative Shaw, you wanted to unpack B and C, right? Did you have, are you okay with those? Okay. All right. So are folks okay with the other repeals?
And these are the ones that are the repeal of codified law, not changing anything with a sunset.
Okay. And Patrick's back. So do we want to, since we have Patrick back in the room, do we want to go back to EVs or MBUFs?
I'm just still on this question.
Okay.
So who keeps track of this to check back?
Oh, we have a sunset database.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. That little
So you're looking at it.
It is not all in my brain. I will.
I'm certainly not gonna remember this.
I will. When we prepare the act summaries at the end of the year, we fill out some little charts and those go to a database. That's why, like, I was able to let the agency know, like, hey, you're about to not be able to do your T3s. And then I looked at it and was, oh, and by the way, we forgot to add this report to the reports database. So yes, sometimes user error is there, but we try and stick it all in database.
All right, thank you.
Every birthday.
No, I'm good.
Okay, so why don't we to use another translation metaphor, we'll reverse and go back to do the sections that have to do with the EV incentives.
Okay, so you're going to want to go back to section 9, and this is going to be on page 9.
We didn't want to do this without you, Patrick.
Okay. do you want me to talk about the changes? Do you want me to just sort of start at the beginning? Do you want me to go back to the chart? I feel like there are so many ways you
I
could.
know, there's so many ways that we could do this. What would be helpful? I don't know, because how are people feeling about do we pull out our charts and go back to it, or do people want to walk through the language? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, so what is our question at this point? Because we've gotten the comparison chart of what the program is currently and what we're suggesting. And so are we just deciding whether we want to
Go with the
recommendation of giving a little bit more money to people with a little bit less income?
We're reviewing the administration's proposal there's two, but right to, we agreed that the committee agreed that we want to codify this, so it's looking at the proposal. So maybe we just have both of them cite the two documents and we work with our let's just try to walk through the language as a start, and then when we need to refer to our side-by-side chart, that could be helpful. And then if we get really stuck, also, I know that Patrick sent us like an overview that I emailed to you, and it's on our committee webpage for today too. So that might be the three-legged stool that we use to get through this.
So the things then, I'm going to keep the language up for the time being. The other thing that I have in front of me is the sort of simplified 5-page chart that doesn't compare language but compares like points of significance or decision points. And then I will sort of reference the chart as we go through the language, and I can switch over to the chart if people need me to put it up.
That sounds great.
So just to be clear, this language that we're gonna go over that's in this chart is actually H101.
No, we're not on that chart
Oh,
yet.
we're not on this chart.
No, we're on a different chart.
The electric vehicles, this is what the administration is recommending, proposing, yeah.
No, so Patrick gave a 1-page document.
Anthea, what is the title of that?
So it'll say, big picture comparison of current vehicle incentive programs and transportation bill proposal draft 2.2, and it's dated February 18th, 2023.
So let's just wait a minute while people find it, because it looks like this. It's 5 pages.
And some of you might have the 3 pages at the end, the last of which is going to be legal sized.
Well, I know, I think we didn't get the legal one.
No.
And I will get it up on ready to go to put on the screen if need be.
This last page.
Screener and I'll just look at
Yes, for a minute.
Yeah.
Here, I'll tell you where you can find it once I figure out where to find it.
Yeah.
It's under yesterday's.
Oh,
Okay. Yes, so Wednesday, March 1st, first document under my name, this one. And this is the 8-page document. So if you go to yesterday and you click on the first document under my name, you'll have all 8 pages.
Okay.
Okay, so I think even if you are only going to codify some of the programs, that you are still going to do this as a new chapter in Title 19, and you're going to want to have a definition section. Some of the definitions might change depending on which programs you codify. It could be that the only definition that you put in there is the definition for plug-in electric vehicle, but it's a good thing to sort of have at the start of a chapter. So the definitions that are included in the language as proposed by the administration would have a definition for electric bicycle. That's because it's one of the options under the Replace Your Ride program. A definition of electric cargo bicycle, because it's one of the things that the agency is proposing be an option under the Replace Your Ride program. And because an electric cargo bicycle is something that would be an option under the Electrify Your Fleet program that they're also proposing to be codified. And then the third definition is the definition for plug-in electric vehicle, and that is going to be plug-in electric vehicle umbrella term, covers plug-in hybrid electric vehicle and battery electric vehicle. If you are only going to codify the incentive program for new PEVs, I think you just need subdivision 3. If you're going to codify Replace Your Ride, then you probably need the other two. And if you're gonna electrify your fleet, then you're gonna need the definition for electric cargo bicycle. The reason why I say probably for replace your ride is because a decision point is gonna be whether or not you extend that program to electric cargo bicycles. I'll pause after each section within this section.
Representative Burke.
Sorry, I was looking for the document and I didn't find it, and you said, is codifying electric bicycle program.
It is not the agency's proposal to codify the electric bicycle program.
The proposal is to codify the new PEV program. And Mileage Smart program?
The agency's proposal is to codify the incentive program for new PEVs, Mileage Smart, Replace Your Ride, and electrify your fleet.
Okay, thank you very much.
Again, that's the agency's proposal.
Representative Burke, did you?
Oh, I'm fine, yes,
Okay,
that's all I need to know, sorry.
And there haven't been any changes to that. That's been the agency's proposal from the beginning.
All right, so are we okay with the definitions? Yeah.
I think you can say you're okay with them, and then I'll pull them out if you decide not to codify everything.
Sure.
Okay, 2902. This is the incentive program for new plug-in electric vehicles. This is the one that's been around the longest. This is the one that was created in 2019 at the same time as Mileage Smart. This is the one that is just for new vehicles and just based on income eligibility. And then there are limitations on the vehicles that are incentivizable. In terms of your language, 2902 subsection A creates the program. There is created the incentive program for new plug-in electric vehicles. It'll be administered by the Agency of Transportation. It does not have, like an existing session law, the required consulting with other entities within state government and outside state government. And then it says, subject to state procurement requirements, the agency may retain a contractor or contractor, so it can be multiple, to assist with marketing, program development, and administration of the program. That is roughly analogous to current law. I'll stop there.
Other questions on this part? So, Representative Dodge and Representative White.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering whether we do want to include any consulting with any other agencies or arms or entities in the government, or whether it's something that, you know,
We
the
currently
people that
do.
are distributing, yeah, okay.
We currently do. I mean, I think this is what Drive Electric, is this referring to that, or that's a good question.
So the original consulting entities were not, I don't think, Drive Electric. They were like the Department for Environmental Conservation. Do I have the comparison chart? I'll pull up the side by side so you can see what it is under session law. I will say that it is sort of different from saying you need to consult with these entities when you're creating a program, as opposed to when you are like continuing a program. But I think that it would be helpful if we were all on the same page, literally, I'll put it on the screen, as to what the current consulting entities are. Okay, the current consulting entities are, and remember, this was both for the incentive program for new PEVs and Mileage Smart, because they were created in the same piece of session law. The Agency of Transportation needed to consult with the Department of Environmental Conservation, the Department of Public Service, the Vermont Electric Distribution Utilities, and the state's network of community action agencies to establish and administer the programs. So Drive Electric Vermont was not listed as a mandatory consulting entity for the creation of the program. I believe they were included as a consulting entity for like the marketing and outreach that was in the T-bill last year.
Drive Electric Vermont.
I think they were for the marketing piece.
Oh, Patrick, you want to?
I would just say that the agency didn't continue to include that language only because the original intent, I think, was because those programs hadn't yet been designed or established, that we would consult with those entities. But now that they're designed and established, there isn't an ongoing need necessarily to work group, so that we continue to do that on an informal basis anyhow.
And you're certainly not prohibiting them from consulting with other people.
So, Representative Dodge.
Thank you. Yeah, that helps to clarify. And then in number 2, it says that there's going to be collaboration with contractors to assist with marketing programs.
There could be.
Yeah.
It's discretionary.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I just have to keep reading. Sorry.
All right. Okay with that? Yeah.
Subsection B, this is the program structure. It's kind of saying like, this is how you're going to create it. And remember, it's already been created. It comports with this. The incentive program for new PEVs shall structure PEV, so that's both the battery electric and the plug-in hybrid, purchase and lease incentive payments by income to help all Vermonters benefit from electric driving, including Vermont's most vulnerable. That has been existing session law for a while. Specifically, the incentive program for new PEVs shall apply to both purchases and leases of new PEVs, with an emphasis on incentivizing the purchase and lease of battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles with an electric range of 20 miles or greater per complete charge, as rated by the Environmental Protection Agency when the vehicle was new. In terms of differences between subdivision 1 and current session law, it just said like incentivizing, with a focus on incentivizing BEVs. There wasn't the plug-in hybrid piece with the more efficient than 20 miles or greater per complete charge. So that's a shift from session law. I think it's probably a subtle shift that is fully consistent with what the intent has been. And the change from the last time you saw this language to now is to specify that that 20 miles or greater is rated by the EPA, and it was when the vehicle was new. So even though this is only related to new vehicles, there is no sort of issue as to whether or not these plug-in hybrid electric vehicles are retaining over time and retaining, like in warm weather versus cold weather, the battery capacity piece. And then I will say, in terms of the California rules that have been adopted in Vermont, there are additional like consumer protections there with the warranty requirements and stuff for batteries. So that is something that is a known concern in the industry that's being focused on.
And this is highlighted because we had some discussion about this, and so.
Yeah. And so this is a change from draft 2.2.
Yeah. So that just to.
And I don't know if the agency is opposed to this addition, but it wasn't something that originated from the agency. This was what I took your committee discussion to be directing me to do.
Patrick, okay with this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's just further clarifying what the agency was doing.
Great. Folks okay with this? Okay, great.
Okay.
We're scheduled for break at 10:30. We're going to continue, but we'll keep chugging along.
Works for me. Okay, subdivision 2 shall provide not more than one incentive of not more than $3,000 for a PEV, so that's going to be either battery electric or plug-in hybrid electric, per individual per year to, and then this is where we get to that complicated chart showing the different eligibility pieces. So I'm going to flip over to chart form because I think it's easier. So if you're in that side-by-side posted under my name for yesterday's date, if you look at the last 3 pages, these are going to be your income eligibility charts. Third to last page is current law. Second to last page is what the agency is proposing. And then third to last page is showing both. So I'm just going to stay on the third to last page and move between the two. The significant things to focus on here are the agency is proposing to pull out head of household from individual single, and this is tax filing status, and then to in no cases lower the income, adjusted gross income thresholds, but in some instances, increase them so that more people will be eligible for an incentive. And then there's differences in terms of whether or not they're proposing raising the lower income higher incentive, or if they're choosing to raise everything. But in no instance is someone with an adjusted gross income that is currently eligible for the program not going to be eligible for the program under their proposed changes. They are expanding eligibility. And then they are increasing with that up to the incentive amounts from the current levels, which are maxing out for the highest incentive, lowest income for a battery electric vehicle, currently caps out at 4,000. That would cap out at not more than 6,000. And for the higher income, lower incentive amount for a battery electric vehicle, currently caps out at 2,500. Under the administration's proposal, it would cap out at not more than 3,000. So more people eligible, higher potential incentive amounts.
I just might want to ask Patrick a question about this. So to come up with these numbers, like, we've had a discussion about this. I think I'm just going to say, the rationale is, to get a higher incentive for people with lower income, so they have more dollars to go into that, to work in concert with the federal incentives. But to come up with this, is it based on the experience of the current programs? Did you reach out to other groups to get their input on this? Like folks who work with, who are managing some of the programs like the Mileage Smart Replace Your Ride, which is folks those programs are catered towards, not catered to, but working with folks of lower income. So was that part of did you engage with those folks to come up with this proposal?
So I think it's important, maybe just to take a bit of a step back, it's important to recognize that, and to kind of address an earlier comment, that these figures are not necessarily determining that we are increasing, they're providing the agency the ability to increase that. And in part, to be able to change, at least on the margins, some of the calculus involved with lower income households, to be able to increase the rate at which folks are buying new PVs to then filter into more of the used vehicle market. So right now, about 73% of vehicle sales are used vehicles. In order to make any headway on electrification, we need that percentage to decrease, at least in the short term. And so the need then is to build upon the Inflation Reduction Act, which won't fully you won't realize the full benefit of that for a couple of years. First, because 2024 is the year in which folks without tax liability will be able to take advantage of that full amount, but then there's the need for automakers to sort of catch up to some of the requirements in the Inflation Reduction Act around battery components, critical mineral sourcing, so that those vehicles would be able to claim the full credit up to the $7,500. So in the interim, there's the need to have potentially a higher state incentive that allows people at lower income levels to still participate and have a sort of easier time making a decision to purchase a new vehicle versus a used vehicle. So the Mileage Smart program, also to clarify, it is targeted to 80% AMI, state area median income. But there are folks at that, so that still fall into the qualifications that are at the higher end of that. Mm-hmm. So there's a bit of a disincentive right now because of the amounts that are offered by Mileage Smart versus what's offered by the new PV program, potentially to participate in one versus the other. there's, so the income qualifications that are proposed here are meant to adjust for inflation that's happened over the past few years and to eliminate some of those cases where there are folks that would qualify for Mileage Smart, but not for the lower income tier of the new PEV program. There was a couple of slides there that showed where some potential overlap is because of the way that both income guidelines are structured. But then it's also important to recognize that all of what the agency is asking for the new PEB program and Replace Your Ride in particular, is already available to us through the Mileage Smart program. So there is no, first of all, there's no income, base MSRP vehicle cap for Mileage Smart program. You could purchase a vehicle in excess of $45,000, in excess of $50,000. So it's more permissive. Right? There's no individual amount set for the Mileage Smart incentive. It's just an up to $5,000, which means the agency has the ability to provide some lower amount. And in fact, in concert with Capstone, there is that additional 25% cap, so that for lower cost vehicles, you're not subsidizing, more than half the vehicle. It's so that's one aspect, and then I think lastly, what we're asking for in terms of flexibility within those incentive amounts is just that we'd be able to look at vehicles that are currently have 20-mile range or above, but that could be raised. So the Mileage Smart program is capped. This has a minimum, of 40 miles per gallon for an incentivized vehicle, but that doesn't necessarily limit the agency to the threshold. So all of these sort of smaller components to what the agency has proposed are already embedded in the Mileage Smart program.
Thank you for the detail. I guess I'm wondering, did you engage with the organizations who is Capstone and all those, are they on board with this? I think it's, have you consulted with other people?
We didn't consult with Capstone in particular, but we've gotten regular feedback through John Electric Vermont and through our administrator, Center for Sustainable Energy, which works with other states as well, to be able to help inform these recommendations.
Okay. Other questions? I think we're going to continue with this, but we are due for a little bit of a break. Should we? I think we should pause here. I just know that, why don't we pause here? Because you're going to be staying with us, Patrick. I'm sure we're going to have more questions.
Bounce from committee.
Okay, all right. I think because we've been here for 2 hours, and I think it's good to take a stretch. So let's, we're scheduled for a break at 10:30. We'll come back at